I never told my son, David, about my $40,000 monthly income. Not a word. For 35 years, he's seen me as the woman who lives in this quiet 2-bedroom condo in Oak Park, just outside Chicago. The woman who clips coupons, who drives a 10-year-old Toyota, who works a quiet job from home. To him, I was just his mom, Eleanor Vance, a simple, low-level accountant who was good with numbers and better at making casseroles. He never knew that good with numbers meant I was a senior quantitative analyst for one of the largest, most successful hedge funds in the city. He never knew that while he thought I was doing the books for a small firm, I was actually writing algorithms that moved hundreds of millions of dollars before breakfast. One day, he invited me to dinner with his wife Emily's parents, the Barringtons, who were visiting from Boston. I decided to see, just once, how they would treat a poor person. I decided to play the part of the broke, naive mother my son had accidentally described. But the moment I stepped through the doors of that Michelin star restaurant, everything changed. What happened that night devastated my daughter-in-law and her family in a way they never imagined. And trust me, they deserved every second of it. But before I tell you exactly how I took them down, if you enjoy stories about life's hidden truths and seeing arrogant people get what's coming to them, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to Aunt Millie's Tales for more stories just like this one. And please, comment below. Have you ever had to hide who you really are? I'd love to hear your story. Let me explain how I got there. Let me tell you who I really am, because my son, David, at 35 years old, never knew the whole truth about his mother. To him, I was just the woman who left early for the office when he was young, who came back tired, who cooked with whatever was in the fridge. Just another employee, a secretary maybe, someone ordinary, nothing special. And I never corrected him. I never told him that I earned $40,000. Every single month. That I had been a senior partner at a quantitative hedge fund for almost 20 years, signing off on strategies that affected global markets. Why tell him? Money was never something I needed to hang on the wall like a trophy. I grew up in an era where dignity was carried within, where silence was worth more than hollow words. My father, a steelworker in South Chicago, taught me that you don't talk about what you have. You show who you are through your work. So, I guarded my truth. I lived in the same modest apartment for years after my husband, his father, passed away. I used the same leather handbag until the strap was worn thin. I bought my clothes at Kohl's and Goodwill. I cooked at home. I saved everything. I invested everything. And I became rich, in silence. Because true power doesn't shout. True power observes. And I was observing very, very closely when David called me that Tuesday afternoon. His voice sounded different, nervous, like when he was a kid and had broken a lamp. "Mom, I need to ask you a favor." "Anything, David. You know that. What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. It's just Emily's parents are visiting from Boston. It's their first time here and, well, they want to meet you. We're having dinner on Saturday at L'Etoile. Please come." L'Etoile. The most exclusive 3-Michelin star restaurant in Chicago. The kind of place where a single tasting menu costs more than my monthly mortgage payment. Something in his tone made me deeply uncomfortable. It wasn't the voice of a son proudly inviting his mother. It was the voice of someone asking his mother not to be an embarrassment, to fit in, to make a good impression. "Do they know anything about me?" I asked calmly, keeping my voice even. There was a long, painful silence. Then David stammered. I told them you work in an office, that you live alone, that you're simple, that you don't have much." There it was, that word, simple. As if my entire life, my struggles, my victories, could be contained in that one miserable adjective. As if I were a problem he needed to apologize for. I felt a cold knot tighten in my stomach, but I didn't let it into my voice. I took a deep, slow breath. Okay, David. I'll be there. I hung up and looked around my living room. The old but comfortable sofa, the walls without expensive original art, the small television. Nothing that would impress anyone. And in that precise moment, I made a decision. If my son thought I was a poor, simple woman, if his wife's Boston-bred parents were coming ready to judge me, then I would give them exactly what they expected to see. I would pretend to be broke, naive, a little desperate, a mother barely surviving on a meager salary. I wanted to feel firsthand how they treated someone who had nothing. I wanted to see their true faces, because I had a suspicion. I suspected Emily, and especially her family, the Barringtons, were the type of people who measured a person's worth by the balance in their bank account. And my instinct never fails. Saturday arrived. I went to my closet and pushed past the few expensive, well-tailored suits I kept for board meetings. I dug into the very back and pulled out the worst outfit I owned. A shapeless, wrinkled beige dress I'd bought at Goodwill for $5. I paired it with a faded, slightly stained cardigan and a pair of old, scuffed-up ballet flats. No jewelry, not even a watch. I grabbed a faded canvas tote bag, pulled my hair back into a messy, careless ponytail, and looked in the mirror. I looked like a woman broken by life, forgettable, tired, perfect. I called an Uber, a regular Toyota Camry, not the Uber Black I usually took, and gave the address. A high-end building in the Fulton Market District. The kind of place where the menu is written in French and doesn't list prices, because if you have to ask, you can't afford it. As we drove, I felt a strange mix of anticipation and profound sadness. Anticipation, because I knew I was walking into a trap, but I was the one setting it. And sadness, because a part of me, the mother in me, still hoped I was wrong. I hoped they would be kind, that they would look past the old clothes and see the woman who raised their son-in-law. But the other part of me, the part that had survived and thrived for 40 years in the cutthroat world of high finance, among the sharpest corporate sharks, that part knew exactly what was waiting for me. The Uber stopped in front of the restaurant. Warm lights, a valet in a sharp uniform, elegant people gliding through the revolving doors. I paid, stepped out, took a deep breath, and crossed the threshold. And there they were. David was standing next to a long table near the floor-to-ceiling windows. He wore a dark suit, looking anxious and pale. Beside him was Emily, my daughter-in-law. She wore a tailored, cream-colored silk dress that probably cost $2,000. Her blonde hair was perfect. She looked impeccable, as always. But she wasn't looking at me. She was looking towards the entrance, with a tense, almost mortified expression. And then I saw them. Margaret and Richard Barrington, already seated, waiting like royalty on their thrones. Margaret, Emily's mother, wore a fitted emerald green dress, not sequins, but a subtle, expensive-looking fabric. Understated pearls at her neck and wrists that I instantly recognized as Mikimoto. Her dark hair was pulled back in an elegant, severe bun. She had that cold, calculated New England beauty that doesn't invite, it intimidates. Beside her was Richard, her husband, an immaculate gray suit, a giant, clearly expensive watch on his wrist. A Patek Philippe, I noted. He had a serious, master of the universe expression. Both of them looked like they had stepped out of a town and country magazine cover shoot. I walked toward them slowly, with short, hesitant steps, as if I were afraid of the plush carpet. David saw me first. His face, it just crumbled. His eyes widened, scanning me from my scuffed shoes to my wrinkled dress. I saw him swallow hard. "Mom," You came. His voice was strained. Of course, David. Here I am. I smiled timidly, the smile of a woman completely out of her depth. Emily greeted me with a quick, cold kiss on the cheek. Mechanical. Eleanor, it's nice to see you. Her eyes said the opposite. She introduced me to her parents in a strange, almost apologetic tone. Dad, Mom, this is David's mother, Eleanor. Margaret Barrington looked up. She didn't get up. She just studied me. And in that single 2-second glance, I saw everything. The judgment, the disdain, the immediate, profound disappointment. Her eyes scanned my wrinkled dress, my old shoes, my canvas tote bag. She didn't say anything at first. She just extended a hand, cold, quick, and weak. A pleasure. Richard did the same. A weak handshake, a false, tight-lipped smile. Charmed. I sat down in the chair at the far end of the table, the one furthest from them, as if I were a second-class guest. No one helped me pull out my chair. No one asked if I was comfortable. The waiter, a young man in a starched uniform, arrived with the elegant, heavy menus. I opened mine and pretended to be utterly baffled by the French terms. Margaret watched me, a small, cruel smirk playing on her lips. Do you need some help with the menu, Eleanor? She asked, her voice dripping with false sweetness. Oh, yes. Please, I don't know what any of these words mean. My voice came out small, timid, and breathy. She sighed, a put-upon dramatic sound. She ordered for me, without even asking what I liked. She'll have the chicken. Something simple, she told the waiter. Something that, well, you understand. We don't want to overdo it. The phrase hung in the air like poison. Richard nodded in agreement. David stared at the tablecloth, his knuckles white. Emily played with her napkin. No one said anything, and I just watched. Margaret started the conversation, first about general things, the journey from Boston, how tiring the flight was, how different Chicago was from New England. And then, subtly, she began to talk about money. She mentioned the hotel where they were staying. The peninsula is adequate, I suppose. The suite is only $1,500 a night, but the service is passable. She mentioned the luxury SUV they had rented. A simple Escalade, of course. She mentioned the stores they had visited on Michigan Avenue. We bought a few things. Nothing major. Just a few thousand to tide us over. She spoke while looking directly at me, expecting a reaction. Expecting me to be impressed, to gasp. I just nodded. How nice, I said. That's just lovely. She continued, You know, Eleanor, Richard and I have always been very careful with money. We worked hard. We invested well. Now we have properties in 3 states. A home in Beacon Hill, a summer place in Nantucket. Richard has major businesses, and I oversee our philanthropic endeavors and investments. She smiled, a smile of pure, unadulterated superiority. And you, Eleanor? What is it, exactly, that you do? Her tone was sweet, but the question was a knife. Oh, me? I replied, lowering my gaze as if in shame. I work in an office. I do a little bit of everything, you know. Paperwork, filing, just simple things. I do the books for a small firm. Margaret exchanged a look with Richard, a look that said, I knew it. Ah, I see. Administrative work, she said. Well, that's fine. It's honest. All jobs are dignified, aren't they? Of course, I replied. The food arrived, enormous artistic plates with tiny, meticulous portions. Margaret cut into her filet mignon with precision. This steak is $90, she said, as if to educate me. But it's worth it. Quality is worth paying for. One can't just eat. Anything, can one? I just nodded. Of course. You're right. David tried to change the subject, talking about his work in marketing, some new project he was excited about. Margaret interrupted him mid-sentence. David, darling, does your mother live all alone? David nodded, looking uncomfortable. Yes, she has a small condo in Oak Park. Margaret looked at me with a mask of feigned pity. Oh, Eleanor. It must be so difficult, isn't it? Living all alone at your age, without much support. And does your little salary cover everything? The bills? Well, everything? I felt the trap closing. I replied, I barely manage, but I get by. I save where I can. I don't need much. Margaret sighed, a long, dramatic exhalation. Oh, Eleanor, you are so brave, truly. I admire women who struggle, all alone. Although, of course, one always wishes to give our children more, to give them a better life. But, oh well, everyone gives what they can. There it was. The subtle, but deadly, blow. She was telling me I hadn't been enough for my son, that I hadn't given him what he deserved, that I was a poor, insufficient, and embarrassing mother. Emily was staring at her plate, her face flushed red. David was clenching his fists under the table, his jaw tight. And I just smiled. My small, timid, broken smile. Yes, you're right. Everyone gives what they can. Margaret continued, warming to her subject. We always made sure Emily had the best. The best private schools. She traveled the world, learned 4 languages. Now she has an excellent job, earns very well. And when she married David, well, we helped them. Quite a bit. She leaned in, as if sharing a secret, though her voice was loud enough for the whole table to hear. We gave them the money for the down payment on their Lincoln Park condo. A gift, of course. We paid for their honeymoon to Europe. 3 weeks, because that's just who we are. We believe in supporting our children. She looked at me, her eyes sharp and assessing. And you, Eleanor? Were you able to help David with anything when they got married? The question floated in the air like a sharp, poisoned dart. Not much, I replied, my voice cracking slightly. I gave them what I could. A small gift. Margaret smiled, that cold, victorious smile. How sweet. Every little detail counts, right? The amount doesn't matter. It's the intention that's important. And right then, I felt the rage begin to stir within me. It wasn't an explosive, hot rage. It was cold, controlled, like a river of ice under pressure. I breathed slowly. I kept the timid smile plastered on my face. And I let Margaret keep talking. Because that's what people like her do. They talk. They inflate themselves. They show off. And the more they talk, the more they reveal themselves. The more they expose the absolute hollow emptiness inside. Margaret took a sip of her glass of red, expensive wine. A cult, Napa Cabernet. Richard had called it. $500 a bottle, he'd announced. She swirled it in her hand, as if she were an expert. This wine, it's just exquisite. But when you know quality, you don't skimp. Do you drink wine, Eleanor? Only on special occasions, I replied. And usually just the cheapest one from the grocery store. I don't understand much about these things. Margaret smiled condescendingly. Oh, don't worry, dear. Not everyone has a trained palate. That comes with experience, with travel, with education. Richard and I have visited vineyards all over Europe. We are quite knowledgeable. Richard nodded. It's a hobby. Something we enjoy. Emily is learning too. She has good taste. She inherited it from us. He looked at Emily with pride. Emily offered a weak, sick-looking smile. Thanks, Dad. Margaret turned back to me, her eyes gleaming. And you, Eleanor? Do you have any hobbies? Anything you enjoy doing in your free time? I shrugged, making myself look smaller. Oh, I watch television. I cook. I walk in the park. Just simple things. Margaret and Richard exchanged another look. A look so loaded with silent judgment, it was practically a shout. How lovely, Margaret said, her voice a purr. Simple things have their charm, too. Although, of course, one always aspires to more, doesn't one? To see the world, to experience new things, to grow, culturally. But, well, I understand. Not everyone has those opportunities. I just nodded. You're right. Not everyone has those opportunities. The waiter arrived with dessert, tiny, beautiful portions of edible art. Margaret ordered the most expensive one, a sphere of chocolate with edible gold leaf on top. $35 for a piece of cake the size of a cookie, she announced. This is delicious. It has real gold on top. See those little flakes? It's a detail only the best restaurants offer. I ate my simple, cheaper dessert in silence. Margaret continued, setting down her spoon. You know, Eleanor, I think it's important that we talk about something, as a family, now that we're all here. She looked up. Her expression changed, becoming serious, falsely maternal. David is our son-in-law, and we love him very much. Emily loves him, and we respect that decision. But as parents, we always want the best for our daughter. David tensed up. Mom, I don't think this is the time. Margaret raised a perfectly manicured hand. Let me finish, David. This is important. She looked at me. Eleanor, I understand you did the best you could with David. I know raising him alone wasn't easy, and I truly, truly respect you for that. But now David is at another stage in his life. He's married, he has responsibilities, and, well, Emily and he deserve to have stability. Stability? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Yes, Margaret replied, her voice firm. Financial, emotional. We have helped them a lot, and we will continue to help. But we believe it's important that David doesn't have unnecessary burdens. Her tone was crystal clear. She was calling me a burden, me, his mother. Emily was staring at her plate as if she wanted to sink through the floor. David had his jaw clenched so tight I was afraid he'd crack a tooth. Burdens, I repeated. Margaret sighed, the picture of fake patience. I don't want to sound harsh, Eleanor. But at your age, living alone, with such a limited salary, it's natural for David to worry about you, to feel that he must take care of you. And that's fine. He's a good son. But we don't want that worry to affect his marriage. Do you understand me? Perfectly, I replied. Margaret smiled, sensing victory. I'm so glad you understand. That's why, well, Richard and I have been thinking about something. She paused, for dramatic effect. We could help you, financially. Give you a small monthly allowance, a stipend, something that allows you to live more comfortably without David having to worry so much. Obviously, it would be modest. We can't work miracles, but it would be a support. I remained silent, watching her, waiting. She continued, and in exchange, we would only ask that you respect David and Emily's space. Not to seek them out so much, not to pressure them, to give them the freedom to build their life together, without interference. How does that sound? There it was, the offer, the bribe, disguised as charity. They wanted to buy me off. They wanted to pay me to disappear from my own son's life, so I wouldn't be a nuisance, so I wouldn't embarrass their precious daughter with my goodwill dress and my simple life. David exploded. Mom, that is enough. You don't have to. Margaret interrupted him, her voice sharp. David, calm down. We are talking like adults. Your mother understands. Don't you, Eleanor? I picked up my napkin. Calmly, I wiped my lips. I took a slow sip of water. I let the silence stretch out, heavy and thick. Everyone was staring at me. Margaret, with smug expectation. Richard, with arrogance. Emily, with gut-wrenching shame. David, with pure, desperate rage. And then, I spoke. My voice came out differently. It was no longer timid. It was no longer small. It was firm, clear, and cold as ice. That's an interesting offer, Margaret. Truly, very generous of you. Margaret smiled, victorious. I'm glad you see it that way. I nodded. But I have a few questions. Just to understand, clearly. Margaret blinked, thrown off. Of course. Ask whatever you like. I leaned forward, just slightly. How much exactly would you consider a modest monthly allowance? Margaret hesitated, suddenly on the back foot. Well, we were thinking about $500, maybe $700, depending. I nodded. I see. $700 a month for me to respect their space, to disappear from my son's life. Margaret frowned. I wouldn't put it quite like that, but yes. No, I responded, my voice hardening. That is exactly how you put it. She adjusted herself in her chair, her pearls clicking softly. Eleanor, I don't want you to misunderstand. We just want to help. Of course, I said. Help, like you helped with the down payment on the condo. How much was that again? You mentioned it. Margaret nodded, her pride returning. $40,000, a cash gift. Ah, $40,000, how generous. And the honeymoon? $15,000, Margaret said, puffing up. It was a 3-week trip through Europe. Incredible. Unbelievable, I replied, my voice flat. So, you've invested about $55,000 in David and Emily. A significant sum. Margaret smiled. Well, when you love your children, you don't hold back. I nodded slowly. You're right. When you love your children, you don't hold back. But tell me something, Margaret. All that investment, all that money, did it buy you anything? Margaret blinked, confused. What? What do you mean? Did it buy you respect? I continued, my voice low and sharp. Did it buy you real love? Or did it just buy you obedience? The atmosphere at the table shattered. Margaret stopped smiling. Excuse me? My tone became sharper. You have spent this entire night talking about money, about how much things cost, how much you spent, how much you have. But you haven't asked me even once how I am, if I'm happy, if I'm healthy, if I need company. You have only, from the second I arrived, calculated my worth, and apparently, I'm worth $700 a month. Margaret turned pale. I didn't. Yes, I interrupted her. Yes, you did. Since I walked in, you've been measuring my value with your wallet. And do you know what I discovered, Margaret? I discovered that the people who only talk about money are the ones who least understand its true value. Richard intervened, his voice a low growl. I think you are misinterpreting my wife's intentions. I turned my gaze to him, cold, steady. And what are her intentions, Richard? To treat me with pity? To humiliate me throughout this entire dinner? To offer me alms so I'll vanish from my son's life? Did I misinterpret that? Richard opened his mouth but said nothing. David was pale, staring at me as if seeing me for the first time. Mom, please. No, David. Please don't. I looked at him. I'm done being quiet. I'm done being simple. I placed the napkin on the table. I leaned back in my chair. There was no more timidity in my posture, no more shrinking. I looked Margaret Barrington directly in the eyes. She held my gaze for a second, then quickly looked away, uncomfortable. Something had changed, and she felt it. Everyone felt it. "Margaret," I said, "you said something very interesting a moment ago. You said you admire women who struggle alone, who are brave." Margaret nodded slowly, her eyes wary. "Yes, I did." "Then let me ask you something. Have you ever struggled? Alone? Have you ever had to work without your husband backing you? Have you ever built something from nothing, with your own two hands, without your family's money?" Margaret stammered. I have my own achievements." "Like what?" I asked, with genuine curiosity. "Tell me." Margaret adjusted her hair, flustered. I manage our investments. I oversee our properties. I make important decisions in our businesses." I nodded. "Businesses your husband built. Properties you bought together. Investments made with the money he generated. Or am I wrong?" Richard bristled, annoyed. "That's not fair." "My wife works just as hard as I do." "Of course," I replied calmly. "I don't doubt she works. But there is a fundamental difference between managing money that already exists and creating it from scratch, between overseeing an empire you inherited or married into, and building it, brick by brick, don't you think?" Margaret pressed her lips together, her face hardening. "I don't know where you're going with this, Eleanor." "Let me explain," I replied. 40 years ago, I was 23 years old. I was a secretary at a small insurance firm in the Loop. I earned minimum wage. I lived in a rented room in a bad neighborhood. I ate ramen noodles for dinner, and I was alone. Completely alone. David stared at me. I had never told him this, not in such detail. I continued. One day, I got pregnant. The father? He disappeared. My family turned their backs on me. I had to decide whether to keep going or give up. I chose to keep going. I worked until the last day of my pregnancy. I went back to work 2 weeks after David was born. A neighbor watched him during the day. I worked 12, sometimes 14 hours a day. I paused and drank some water. No one at the table moved. No one even breathed. "I didn't stay as secretary," I said, my voice quiet but carrying across the table. "I studied at night at the public library. I took community college courses. I learned accounting. I learned finance. I learned computer programming, back when no one knew what it was. I taught myself statistical analysis. I became an expert in things no one taught me. All on my own, all while raising a child, all while paying rent, food, medicine, and clothes." Margaret was staring at her plate now. Her arrogance was beginning to crumble. "And do you know what happened, Margaret?" I climbed, little by little, from secretary to assistant, from assistant to analyst, from analyst to manager, from manager to director. It took me 20 years of nonstop work, of sacrifices you cannot possibly imagine. But I did it. And do you know how much I earn now, Margaret? From my simple job? I asked the question. Margaret just shook her head, speechless. $40,000, I said. The silence was absolute. It was as if someone had sucked all the air out of the restaurant. David dropped his fork. It clattered loudly on the plate. Emily's eyes went wide as saucers. Richard frowned, his brain clearly trying to process the number. And Margaret? She just froze. Her mouth was slightly open. $40,000, I repeated, letting the words land. Every single month for almost 20 years. That's almost $500,000 a year. That's almost $10 million in gross income over my career. Not counting investments, not counting bonuses, not counting my partnership stake. Margaret blinked several times. No, I don't understand. You earn $40,000 a month? That's right, I replied calmly. I am the senior quantitative analyst and a minority partner at one of the most successful hedge funds in Chicago. I oversee strategies that manage billions of dollars in assets. I make decisions that affect more than 10,000 employees and investors. I sign contracts that you couldn't even read without a team of lawyers, and I do it every day, from my simple condo in Oak Park. David was pale as a ghost. Mom, why? Why did you never tell me? I looked at him, and for the first time, my voice softened. Because you didn't need to know, David. Because I wanted you to grow up valuing effort, not money. Because I wanted you to become a person, not an heir. Because money corrupts, and I wasn't going to let it corrupt you. I wanted you to build your own life. But then, Emily whispered, finding her voice. Why? Why do you live in that small condo? Why do you wear simple clothes? Why don't you drive a luxury car? I smiled, a real smile this time. Because I don't need to, Emily. Because I don't need to impress anyone. Because true wealth isn't shown off, it's held. Because I learned a long, long time ago that the more you have, the less you need to prove it. I turned my gaze back to Margaret. Her face was a mask of red, splotchy shame and white-hot humiliation. That's why I came dressed like this tonight, Margaret. That's why I pretended to be poor. That's why I acted like a broken, naive woman. I wanted to see how you would treat me if you thought I had nothing. I wanted to see your true colors. And boy, did I see them. I saw them perfectly. Margaret was trembling, whether from rage or shame, I couldn't tell. This is ridiculous. If you earned so much money, we would know. David would know. Why would he believe you're poor? Because I let him, I replied. Because I never talked about my job. Because I live simply. Because the money I earn, I invest. I save. I multiply. I don't spend it on pearls from Mikimoto or $500 bottles of wine or showing off in expensive restaurants. Richard cleared his throat, his face dark. Even so, this doesn't change the fact that you were rude, that you misinterpreted our intentions, that you lied. Really? I looked at him, my gaze like steel. I misinterpreted when you said I was a burden to my son? I misinterpreted when you offered to pay me $700 to disappear from his life? I misinterpreted every condescending comment about my clothes, my job, and my life. Richard didn't answer. Neither did Margaret. I stood up. Everyone at the table flinched. Let me tell you something, I said, my voice low and controlled, that clearly no one has ever told you. Money does not buy class. It does not buy real education, and it certainly does not buy empathy. You have money, Margaret, perhaps a lot of it, but you don't have a single ounce of what truly matters. Margaret stood up too, her chair scraping loudly. She was furious. And you do? You, who lied, who deceived us, who came here and made us look like fools? I didn't make you look like fools, Margaret, I replied coldly. You took care of that all on your own. I just gave you the opportunity to show who you really are, and you did it. Magnificently. Emily had tears streaming down her face. Eleanor. I didn't know. Quote. I know, I interrupted her, but my voice was softer now. You didn't know. But your parents knew exactly what they were doing. They knew they were humiliating me, and they enjoyed it, until they discovered that the poor woman they scorned has more money than they do. And now they don't know what to do with that information? Margaret trembled. You have no right. I have every right, I replied. Because I am your son-in-law's mother. Because I deserve respect. Not because of my money, not because of my job, but because I am a human being. Something you seem to have forgotten throughout this entire miserable dinner. David stood up. Mom, please. Let's just go. I looked at him. Not yet, David. I'm not finished. I looked at Margaret one last time. You offered to help me. With $700 a month, let me make you a counteroffer. I will give you $1 million. Right now. A certified check. If you can prove to me that you have ever treated a single person who had nothing, a waiter, a cab driver, a janitor, with kindness and respect. Margaret opened her mouth, closed it, and said nothing. Exactly, I replied. You can't, because to you, people are only worth what they have in the bank. And that, Margaret, is the difference between you and me. I built wealth. You just spend it. I earned respect. You buy it. I have dignity. You just have bank accounts. I picked up my old, faded canvas tote bag. I reached inside, past my old, worn wallet, and I pulled out a small, sleek black card holder. I slipped out a single card. A black, platinum credit card. I dropped it on the table in front of Margaret. This is my corporate card. Unlimited limit. Pay for the entire dinner. With a generous tip. Consider it a gift. From a broke and naive mother. Margaret looked at the card as if it were a venomous snake. Black, shiny, with my name engraved in silver letters, Eleanor Vance, senior partner. Her hand trembled slightly as she picked it up. She turned it over, observed it, then looked at me. Her eyes no longer held that superior, arrogant shine. Now, there was something different. Something I never thought I'd see in her. Fear. I don't need your money, she said, her voice broken. I know, I replied, but I didn't need your pity either. And yet, you offered it to me all night, so take it. As a gesture of courtesy, good manners, something you clearly didn't learn despite all your travels through Europe. Richard slammed his hand gently on the table. Enough! This is out of control. You are disrespecting us. Respect? I repeated. How interesting that you use that word now, Richard. Where was your respect when your wife asked if my salary was enough to live on? Where was it when she suggested I was a burden to my son? Where was it when she offered to buy me off? Richard clenched his jaw. Margaret just wanted to help. No, I corrected him. Margaret wanted to control. She wanted to ensure that the poor mother-in-law wouldn't ruin her daughter's perfect curated image. She wanted to eliminate the weak link in the chain. The problem is, she chose the wrong link. I looked at Emily. Her head was bowed, her hands twisting in her lap, trembling. Emily, I said softly. She looked up, tears streaming down her cheeks. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry. I didn't know. My parents. Don't finish that sentence, I interrupted her. Because you did know. Maybe you didn't know about my money, but you knew how your parents are. You know how they treat people they consider inferior. And you sat there, and you did nothing to stop them. Emily sobbed. I wanted to say something, but they're my parents. I know, I replied, and David is my son. And yet, I let him make his own decisions. I let him choose his life, his wife, his path. Because that is how you love. With freedom, not with control, not with money, not with manipulation. David came closer to me. Mom, forgive me, please. Forgive me for never asking, for assuming, for thinking you were... His voice cracked. I hugged him. You don't have to apologize, David. I did what I did for a reason. I wanted you to be independent, to value the right things. not to depend on me, to build your own life. But I made you feel like I had to protect you, David said. That I had to worry about you, that you were fragile. I know, I replied, and it wasn't wrong that you thought that, because that's how you learn to care, to worry about others, to be empathetic. Those are lessons money can't buy. David hugged me tightly. I'm so sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry. Margaret was still standing, rigid, watching the scene with a mixture of confusion and contained rage. This doesn't change anything, she finally said. You lied. You deceived us. You came here with hidden intentions. You acted in bad faith. That's true, I nodded. I acted. I pretended to be something I'm not, exactly what you do, every single day. What is that supposed to mean? Richard asked, his voice hostile. It means, I said, turning to him, that you hide. You hide behind your money, behind your pearls, behind your trips, behind everything you can buy. But inside, you are empty. You don't have deep conversations. You don't have real interests. You have nothing to offer beyond a bank account. Margaret gave a dry, bitter laugh. Coming from someone who just lied all night, that's hypocrisy. Perhaps, I replied, but my lie, it exposed the truth, your truth, and now you can't hide. Now you know that I saw you, that I felt every comment, that I stored every insult disguised as advice, and that I will never, ever forget it. The waiter timidly approached the table. Excuse me, would you like anything else? Richard shook his head abruptly. Just the check. Now. The waiter nodded and disappeared. Margaret sat back down, defeated. Her posture was no longer elegant. It was the posture of someone who had just lost something important. And it wasn't money. It was power. Eleanor, she said, her voice softer, less aggressive. I don't want this to ruin the relationship between our families. David and Emily love each other. They have a life together. We can't let this... I interrupted her. Let this what, Margaret? Let this ruin your plans? Let this expose what you really think? It's too late for that. The damage is done. But we can fix it, she insisted. We can start over. No, I cut her off, firmly. We can't. Because now, I know who you are. And you know who I am. And that truth cannot be erased with empty apologies or fake smiles. You treated me like trash. And you did it with pleasure, because you thought you could. Richard cleared his throat. You were the one who came here lying. You provoked this situation. You're right. I nodded. I did. I provoked this because I needed to know. I needed to confirm what I already suspected. That you are not good people. That your money doesn't make you better. That you are exactly the kind of people who despise others for not having what you have. The waiter returned with the check in a small black leather folder. He placed it in the center of the table. No one touched it. Margaret looked at my black corporate card, still in her hands. Then she looked at me. I am not going to use your card, she said. We will pay our own bill. As we always do. Perfect, I replied. Then keep that card. As a souvenir. As a little reminder that not everything is as it seems. That the simple woman you scorned all night has more than you will ever have. And I wasn't just talking about money. Margaret put the card down on the table. I don't want it. And I don't want your moral lecture. I pushed it back toward her. Keep it anyway. Because something tells me you'll need it. Someday, you'll run into someone like me again. Someone who pretends to be less than they are. And you'll make the same mistake. Because people like you never learn. Richard took out his wallet. a sleek alligator wallet. He pulled out several credit cards, all golden, all shiny. He chose one, an Amex Platinum, and put it in the folder. The waiter took it and left. No one spoke. The silence was thick, uncomfortable, and heavy. Emily cried quietly into her napkin. David held my hand under the table. Margaret stared at the wall. Richard checked his phone, avoiding all eye contact. The waiter returned. He looked embarrassed. "Sir, I'm very sorry. Your card, it was declined." Richard looked up abruptly. "What? Declined? That's impossible. Run it again." The waiter stammered, "Sir, I did. It was declined. Do you have another form of payment?" Richard turned red. "That's impossible. That card has an extremely high limit. It must be a system error." The waiter shrugged. "I can try again, sir, if you like." Richard handed him another card, a different one. The waiter left. Margaret looked at her husband nervously. "Richard? What happened?" "I don't know," Richard replied, irritated. "It must be a bank error. Maybe they froze the account for security. It happens sometimes when you travel." I nodded with feigned understanding. "Oh, of course. Those things happen. How inconvenient." The waiter returned, again. He looked even more terrified. "Sir, I'm terribly sorry. This one was also declined." Richard stood up. "This is ridiculous. I'm calling the bank right now." He stormed out of the restaurant, pulling his phone from his pocket. Margaret remained seated, ashamed, humiliated. This has never happened to us," she murmured. "Never." "What terrible timing," I commented, my voice void of emotion. David looked at the check. "Mom, I can." "No," I interrupted him. "You are not paying for anything." I took out my old worn leather wallet, the one I'd carried for 15 years. I pulled out another card. This one was not black. It was a heavy, dark, anodized metal. A card that less than 1% of people in the world possess. I put it on the table in front of Margaret. She looked at it. Her eyes widened. She recognized what it was. That's a Centurion card." "That's right," I replied. "The American Express Black Card. By invitation only. Minimum annual spending requirement of $250,000. A $5,000 annual fee just for having it. And benefits you can't even imagine." Margaret said nothing. The waiter, seeing the card, hurried over. He took it carefully, as if it were a sacred object. He returned in less than 2 minutes. "Thank you, Miss Vance. Everything is settled. Would you like the receipt?" "It's not necessary," I replied. The waiter nodded and left. Margaret continued to stare at the space where the card had been. I stood up. I took my old wallet, my canvas tote, and I looked at Margaret one last time. "The dinner was delicious, Margaret. Thank you for the recommendation of the place, and thank you for showing me exactly who you are. You saved me a lot of time, a lot of energy, and many, many future disappointments." Margaret finally looked up. Her eyes were red, not from crying, from pure, contained rage. "This doesn't end here," she said, her voice trembling. "You can't just humiliate us and walk out as if nothing happened. Emily is our daughter. David is our son-in-law. We will still be family. You will have to see us." "You're right," I smiled, a cold, tight smile. "I will have to see you. At birthdays, at Christmases, at family gatherings. But now, I will see you differently. I will no longer wonder what you think of me. I already know, and you will know that I know, and you will live with that. Every time you see me, every time you pretend to be kind, you will remember this night." Richard returned to the table. His phone was in his hand. His face was pale. There's a problem with the accounts, he said. A temporary block. For security. It will be resolved tomorrow. He looked at the table. Did they pay already? Yes, Margaret replied, without looking at him. She paid. Richard looked at me. His pride was shattered. Thank you, he murmured. It was barely audible. You're welcome, I replied. That's what family is for, isn't it? To help each other, especially when someone needs a small allowance. Say, $700? Or in this case, $800, which is what this dinner cost. Richard closed his eyes. Margaret clenched her fists in her lap. David approached me. Mom, let's go, please. It's enough. I looked at him. You're right. It is enough. I turned to Emily. She was still crying quietly. Emily, I said softly. She lifted her head. You are not to blame for how your parents are. No one chooses their family. But you do choose how you act, how you treat others, how you will raise your own children someday. Emily nodded through her tears. I'm sorry, she whispered again. Don't apologize again, I told her. Just learn. Learn that money does not define a person, that humility is not weakness, that respecting others costs nothing, and that if you ever have children, teach them to see the heart of people, not their bank account. Emily sobbed harder. David hugged her. Margaret looked away. Richard checked his phone again, avoiding all eye contact. I headed for the exit. I took a few steps, then stopped, and I turned around, one last time. Oh, and Margaret? One more thing. She looked at me. Do you remember when you said you speak 4 languages? Margaret frowned. What does that have to do with anything? Just curious, I replied. In which of those 4 languages did you learn to be kind? Because, clearly, it wasn't in any of them. Margaret opened her mouth, but no words came out. Exactly, I said. You can speak 100 different languages and still not say anything worth listening to. I walked out of the restaurant. David walked beside me. The fresh, cold Chicago night air hit my face. I breathed deeply. I felt as if a huge, crushing weight had been lifted off me. Not a physical weight, but an emotional one. The weight of pretending, of tolerating, of keeping silent. David took my arm. Mom, are you okay? Perfectly fine, I replied. Better than ever. And you, David? David sighed, running a hand through his hair. I don't know. I'm processing everything. I can't believe you never told me about your job, about your money, about everything you accomplished. I stopped on the sidewalk and looked him in the eyes. Does it bother you? He quickly shook his head. No. Of course not. I'm proud. Unbelievably proud. But I also feel foolish, blind. You are not foolish, I told him. You simply saw what I wanted you to see, and I did it on purpose. Because I needed you to grow up without depending on me, without feeling you had an economic safety net waiting for you. I needed you to fight, to work, to value everything you achieved, on your own. David nodded. I understand, but now I also understand why you never complained, why you never asked for help, why you always seemed so calm, because you needed nothing. I smiled. I needed many things, David. Only none of them could be bought with money. I needed to see you grow up, see you become a good man, see you make the right decisions. And I achieved that. Even marrying Emily? He asked in a weak voice. Even marrying Emily, I replied. She is not her parents. She can learn, she can change. But that That depends on her. And on you. On how you build your relationship. On what values you choose to follow. David remained silent, processing, thinking. An Uber I had called pulled up to the curb. I opened the door. David stopped me. Mom, can I ask you something? Of course. Why did you do it? Why did you come here pretending to be poor? Why didn't you just tell them the truth from the beginning? I closed the taxi door. I turned to him. Because I needed to know, David. I needed to confirm if my suspicions were correct. If Emily's family was really as I imagined. And, unfortunately, I was right. David lowered his gaze. I'm sorry. You don't have to apologize for them, I told him. But you do have to decide what kind of husband you want to be. What kind of father you want to be someday. What do you mean? He asked. I mean that you have just seen two very different ways of handling money and power. Your in-laws' way and mine. They use it to control, to humiliate, to feel superior. I use it to have freedom, to help without showing off, to live peacefully. You decide which path to follow. David slowly nodded. I understand. I opened the taxi door again and got in. I rolled down the window. David came closer. Mom, one last question? Tell me, are you ever going to forgive Margaret and Richard? I thought about it for a moment. Forgiving doesn't mean forgetting, I replied. Nor does it mean allowing it to happen again. I might forgive them. Someday. When I see a real, genuine change. When they start seeing people as people, not as numbers. But until then, I will simply be polite, distant, and extremely cautious. And me? David asked. Do you forgive me? For not asking? For assuming? For allowing this dinner to happen? I looked at him, my heart aching with love. David, there is nothing to forgive. You did what you thought was right. You wanted your family to meet. That is beautiful. What happened afterward was not your fault. It was theirs. And a little bit mine, too, because I decided to play their game. David smiled, weakly. You won. I won. I nodded. But I don't feel victorious. I feel tired and sad, because I confirmed something I didn't want to confirm. That some people will never change. That some families are broken, even if they have money. That there are voids no bank account can ever fill. The taxi driver cleared his throat. Ma'am, should we go? Yes, I replied. Give me 1 second. I looked at David one last time. Go to Emily. Talk to her. Listen to her. Support her. But also, be honest. Tell her how you felt tonight. Tell her what you expect from her family and from her. Because if you don't establish boundaries now, this will happen again and again. I will, David promised. I love you, Mom. And I mean it. More now than ever. Because now I know who you really are. And you are incredible. I smiled. I love you too, David. I always have. I always will. No matter how much money I have or don't have. Because love has no price. And that is a lesson Margaret and Richard will never, ever learn. David stepped away from the taxi. I gave a signal to the driver. The taxi started to move. I looked out the window. I saw David walking back toward the restaurant, his shoulders slumped, thoughtful. He was probably going back to find Emily, to face his in-laws, to have difficult conversations. And I felt proud, because that meant he was maturing. He was learning. He was choosing to be better than the example he had just witnessed. The taxi sped through the illuminated streets of Chicago. I closed my eyes and thought about everything that had happened. Every word, every look, every moment of tension. And I wondered if I had done the right thing. if I had been too harsh, too cruel, too vengeful. But then I remembered every disguised insult, every condescending comment, every look of disdain, and I knew, no, I hadn't been too anything. I had simply been honest. Finally, the taxi crossed the empty streets. The lights of the buildings flashed past. I opened my old canvas tote and took out my phone. A simple phone, nothing flashy. I had 3 unread messages. One from my assistant, asking about a Monday meeting. Another from a colleague, congratulating me on a closed deal. And one from an unknown number. I opened the unknown message. It was from Emily. Eleanor. Please, forgive me. I didn't know my parents would be like that. I am so ashamed. I need to talk to you, please. I looked at the message for a long time. I thought about responding. Then I decided not to. Not yet. She still needed time. Words rushed out of guilt rarely mean anything. True changes. They take time, reflection, and consistent action. I put the phone aside. The taxi driver looked at me through the rearview mirror. Excuse me for asking, ma'am. Is everything okay? I looked up at him. Yes, everything is fine. Why? Well, you got in very quietly, and normally, the people who come out of that restaurant, they're happy, talking about how delicious the dinner was. You came out as if you had just been in a war. I smiled slightly. Something like that. Was it that obvious? He shrugged. I've been driving a cab in this city for 20 years. I've seen it all. Drunk people, people fighting, couples breaking up, families arguing. And you have that look. That look of someone who just said something they'd been keeping inside for years. You're very perceptive, I told him. It's my job, he replied. Do you want to talk about it? You don't have to, but sometimes it helps to tell things to a stranger, someone who isn't going to judge you. I thought about his offer. It was tempting, but I shook my head. Thank you, but I think I've talked enough for today. He nodded. I understand, but let me tell you something. Whatever happened in there, you did the right thing. I know, because you're calm. You're not crying. You're not screaming. You're processing. And that means you spoke your truth. And the truth, it always brings peace, even if it hurts. His words surprised me. He was an older man, maybe 60, with gray hair and working hands. A simple man, like the one I pretended to be. Do you believe in the truth? I asked him. I believe in honesty, he replied. Not always the absolute truth, because the truth changes, depending on who tells it. But honesty doesn't. Honesty is saying things the way you feel them, without masks, without lies, even if it hurts, even if it makes things awkward. I nodded. You're right. My wife always told me I was too direct, he continued, that I said things without a filter. But she also told me that she never doubted me, because she knew that what came out of my mouth was real, not calculated, not manipulated, just real. I smiled. She sounds like a good woman. She was, he replied. She died 5 years ago, but we had 40 years. 40 years of honesty. That's a gift, I murmured. We arrived at my building, an older, middle-class condo building in Oak Park. Nothing luxurious, nothing impressive, but comfortable, safe, home. The taxi driver parked and looked at the building. You live here? I live here, I confirmed. He shook his head, astonished. You truly are special. Most people who come from that restaurant, they live in the Gold Coast, in buildings with doormen and private pools. You live like a normal person. I am a normal person, I replied. I just have more money than most. But that doesn't make me different. It doesn't make me better. Money is just a tool. It's not an identity. He smiled. I wish more people thought that way. The world would be better. I took out my wallet. How much is it? $30, he replied. I gave him a $100 bill. Keep the change. Ma'am, this is too much. It's not, I said. You listened to me? You gave me perspective. You reminded me that there are still good, honest people in the world. That's worth more than $70. He took the bill carefully. Thank you? Truly, thank you. Thank you, I replied, and take care of that honesty. It's rare. It's valuable. Don't lose it. I won't, he promised. I got out of the taxi. I walked into my building, up the stairs. I never used the elevator. I preferred to walk. And reached my door. I took out my keys, the same keys I had had for 15 years. I opened the door. The apartment was cold, empty. I turned on the light. Everything was in its place. The simple living room, the small kitchen, the walls without expensive artwork. And I felt at peace. Because this place was mine, truly mine, not bought to impress, not decorated to show off. Simply a space where I could be myself, without masks, without pretensions. I took off my old scuffed shoes. I took off the wrinkled beige dress, and I put on comfortable clothes, old, soft, familiar pajamas. I made myself some tea. I sat on the sofa in the silence, thinking, processing, feeling, and for the first time in many, many years, I felt completely, utterly free. Free from pretending, free from being silent, free from tolerating, free from being less than I was. Because that night, I didn't just expose Margaret and Richard, I also liberated myself from expectations, from judgment, from the need to hide who I was. And that was invaluable, more than any amount in my bank account. My phone vibrated. Another message. This time from David. Mom, did you get home safe? I smiled. I quickly replied, Yes, David, I'm home, resting. His reply was immediate. I love you. Thank you for everything, for being who you are, for teaching me, for never giving up. I closed my eyes. I felt a tear roll down my cheek, not from sadness, from relief, from love, from gratitude. I replied, I love you too, always. I put the phone aside. I drank my tea. I looked around my simple apartment, my sanctuary, my truth. And I smiled, because at the end of the day, it didn't matter how much money I had. It didn't matter how high I had climbed in my career. The only thing that mattered was this moment, this peace, this honesty. 3 days passed before Emily knocked on my door. 3 days of silence, processing, and reflection. When I heard the bell ring that Wednesday afternoon, I knew it was her. I opened the door. There she was, without makeup, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, dressed in jeans and a plain top. No pearls, no heels. She looked vulnerable, real, different from the woman I had seen in the restaurant. Eleanor, she said, her voice low. May I come in? I stepped aside. Go ahead. She entered slowly, looking around, observing my apartment with new eyes. The simple living room, the old furniture. She sat on the sofa. I sat across from her, waiting. I don't know where to start, she finally said. Start where you feel ready, I replied. She took a deep breath. I came to apologize, but not just with words. I came to explain why my parents are the way they are, and why I stayed silent for so long. I listened. Emily continued, her voice trembling. My parents, they grew up poor, in a small town, working in factories since they were kids. They saw their own parents die young. From lack of medicine, lack of money. They went hungry. They suffered. And they promised themselves they would never be poor again. They would do whatever it took. I nodded. That explains a lot. They worked like animals, Emily continued. They saved every penny. Franklin, my dad, he built his business from scratch, literally from nothing. And when they started earning money, they never forgot what it was like not to have it. That's why they talk about it so much. That's why they measure everything by that standard. Because to them, money means survival. It means security. It means never, ever going back to that dark place. It's understandable, Emily, I said. Trauma, it does strange things to people. But that doesn't excuse how they treated you? Emily nodded. I know, and I want you to know, I saw everything, every comment, every look, and I stayed silent, because I've been doing that my whole life. Staying silent, accepting, letting them control everything, because they taught me that contradicting them was a betrayal. It was ungrateful. And now? I asked. And now? I understand I was wrong, she replied, her eyes meeting mine. That love isn't control. That family isn't blind obedience, that I can love them and still not agree with them. David helped me see it. You helped me see it. That night, at the restaurant, when you revealed yourself, when you told them everything, it was as if a blindfold had been taken off my eyes. Emily wiped her tears. I always knew something was wrong. I always felt that the way they measured people was incorrect. But I convinced myself that it was me, that I was too sensitive, that I didn't understand the real world. But you showed me that no, there is another way to live. A way where money doesn't define your worth, where humility is strength, where authenticity is wealth. I took a sip of water. Emily, I didn't come that night to change you. I came to protect myself, to know who I was dealing with. I know, she replied, and I thank you for that, because your brutal honesty, it saved me. It saved me from becoming my mother, from perpetuating that cycle, from teaching my future children that people are valued by what they have. I don't want that. I don't want to be that. And your parents? I asked. How are they? Emily sighed. Furious, hurt, humiliated. My mother, Margaret, she hasn't spoken to me in 3 days. My father sent me a message saying I had disappointed him, that I had chosen strangers over my own blood, that I would regret it someday. She paused. And you know what's strange? I don't feel bad. I feel free. That's good, I said. It means you made the right decision. Emily nodded. David and I, we set boundaries. We told them they can be a part of our lives, but only if they respect us. If they respect our decisions. If they stop trying to control us with money or emotional blackmail. And if they can't do that, then they will have to accept a distant relationship. How did they take that? I asked. Badly, Emily replied. My mother said we were ungrateful. My father threatened to disinherit me, to cut off all financial aid, as if that were the only thing we cared about, as if our love for them depended on their money. And that's when I realized they really believe that. They really think their value is in their wallet. It's sad, I commented. It's very sad, Emily agreed, because they have so much and they enjoy nothing. They just accumulate, compete, show off, but they never stop to ask themselves if they're happy, if they have peace, if they have real connections. They just count their properties and feel victorious, while inside, they're empty. She was silent for a moment. Then she looked at me directly. Eleanor, I want to ask you for something. Tell me. I want to learn from you. I want you to teach me how to live with dignity, how to be rich without needing to prove it, how to have peace, how to be strong without being cruel. Because that night, I saw something in you that I never saw in my parents. I saw class. I saw real power. I saw a woman who didn't need to shout to be heard. I smiled, a tender, motherly smile. Emily, I can't teach you that. That is learned. By living, by making mistakes, by falling, by getting up. The only thing I can do is share my experience and tell you that the path, it's not easy. You will face criticism, judgment, people who won't understand why you live differently. But if you stay true to yourself, if you live according to your values, you will find peace. And that peace is worth more than any amount of money. I want to try, Emily said. I want to be better. Not just for David, but for me. Because I deserve to live without that constant pressure, without that need to impress, without that fear of not being enough. Then do it, I told her. Start small. Start by questioning your habits, your purchases, your motivations. Ask yourself before every decision, is this for me or for others? Does this bring me peace or just appearance? Emily nodded, taking mental notes. And my parents? Do you think they will ever change? I looked at her with honesty. I don't know, Emily. Change. It requires you to recognize a problem. And they don't believe they have one. They believe the world is wrong, that people are ungrateful, that they are the victims. Until they see that change isn't possible. But you can change. You can break the cycle. I will, she promised, with David's help. And I hope, with your guidance. You don't need my guidance, I replied. You just need your internal compass, that voice that tells you what is right and what is wrong, that voice you silenced for years to please your parents. Listen to it, trust it, follow it. Emily wiped away the last of her tears. Thank you, Eleanor. For everything. For your patience. For your honesty. For not giving up on us. There is nothing to thank me for, I said. Just promise me one thing. When you have children, teach them the value of people, not the price of things. Teach them empathy, humility, and kindness. Things that don't cost any money, but are worth everything. I promise, Emily said firmly. I promise, with all my heart. We hugged. A real, warm, honest hug. No acting, no masks, just two women, connecting. Emily left an hour later, lighter, freer, with hope in her eyes. I closed the door behind her. I sat back down on my sofa. I looked around my simple apartment, and I smiled. Because this was enough. This was everything. An honest space. An authentic life. Real relationships. I didn't need more. I never needed more. My phone rang. It was a message from David. Mom, Emily told me about her visit. Thank you. For welcoming her, for listening to her, for giving her a chance. I love you more than words can express. I replied, simply. I love you too, son. Always. I put the phone aside. I sat by the window. I watched the sunset paint the Chicago sky orange and pink. And in that moment, I understood something fundamental. Real wealth. It's not about how much you have. It's about how much you enjoy what you have. How much peace you feel. How many genuine people surround you. How many times you can look in the mirror and be proud of who you are. Margaret and Richard had millions, but I had this tranquility, this authenticity, this pure love for my son. And that made me infinitely richer than them.